listening to a Brawl Network production. This is a podcast for the best fans in the NFL.
Are you in the Mafia?
Am I in the what?
It's time for a Bills Brawl podcast.
Second down and 7, Kelly with the time. Touchdown! Bill Hawks.
Allen. Deep shot. Touchdown! On the line to Stephon Diggs.
And Sermon breaking tackles at the 22, inside the 10, touchdown Buffalo.
And away we go, Bills Mafia. I am Mike Lindsley. This is another edition of the Bills Brawl. Hit us on Twitter at Bills Brawl, all a part of the Brawl Network. And of course, you can catch my other show called the ML Sports Platter, where podcasts are found. Let's dive deep into some Buffalo Bills football, NFL draft, free agency, some team sustainability stuff, other offseason news and notes with a good pal of mine in the industry, a guy who helps set the standard. He does an unbelievable job covering the Buffalo Bills for 13 WHAM and Fox Rochester as a sports director, editor also for BuffaloPlus.com. Make sure you check that out. He's covered hundreds of Bills games as well. Mike Catalana on Twitter, at Mike Catalana. Mike, welcome aboard, bud. Great to have you on the Bills Brawl, man.
Hey, good to be with you again.
What are the Bills going to do with that first pick?
You know, we made a joke about it when we were doing our own podcast, just saying that, you know, a few years ago, it was relatively easy to use the phrase best player available because the Bills needed everything.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when you're in that spot, you're like, tell me what position they don't need.
Yep.
Now you look at it and say, you know, certainly not any position, right? They're not drafting a quarterback 30th. We know that. And you'd be surprised at some other things, I guess, maybe. But they really can go in a lot of directions. Personally, I think corner is a spot there. And I think they could really help themselves. But you know what? They could move, too. I mean, I know that sometimes you get that anticipation of opening night and the Bills are picking 30th and you wait all night and then they get on the clock and you got Rodgers standing up there saying there's been a trade and now you got to wait a whole day like last year to wait. Of course, you did have Stephon Diggs in the building, so that was good. But I think they could do a lot of things. But if I'm thinking position group, if there's one spot where I don't think it's of the 22 guys who start, if there's one spot where I'd say it is open, it's that second corner spot across from Trey. And I think there's a possibility they draft a guy there will get an opportunity to be the starter.
I'm leaning that way, too. I'm leaning towards corner. You know, and there's obviously a lot of options out there. I think J.C. Horn, the stud out of South Carolina, he'll be long gone. And I don't think Bean will want to give up enough assets to go up and get somebody like that. But they have options other than that. I mean, they got Tyson Campbell. They've got Caleb Farley. They've got Melifanu from Syracuse up the throughway. Is there a particular guy you have your eyes on based on the defense McDermott and Frazier are running, size, speed, agility, all that stuff kind of mixed into one? Do you have a guy who you're targeting on your board, Mike?
Yeah, well, I really like Farley, and I like a lot about him. And I like the way he plays. I like his size, his burst, his instinct, all those things. I love the fact that he was described as a humble homebody, which to me is going to be a T-shirt that McDermott has out for this year, right? You know, hungry and humble, and you know, the guy who's a you know, studies tape and isn't running around all the time. But he's got issues because he was hurt, you know, and he was hurt as a freshman. He's got the back thing, and this year, as we know, Mike, this is the weird year with injuries. Of they don't have the access that they've had to the players before to be able to. I mean, even last year, I was at the Combine last year. You know, it was so strange. Like, everything shut down right after that. But that's what's huge about the Combine. You know, everybody always talks about, guys, the underwear Olympics and all that stuff. Please, you know, that is such a small part of what that's about. That's about meeting face-to-face with the players and getting the medicals. And that has been tougher this year to really get the information. So a guy like Farley, who I think if he was totally healthy would be a top 15 pick and still could be. I just think he just fits them so well. But, Melifano is a really interesting guy because of his size and athletic ability. And I think they could possibly get him in the second round. It looks like he's going to be more of a second round pick. But, it depends on what they do there. But I do like him a lot, too. There's a lot of good players.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
A little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing, too, I mean, Bean could trade down, get more assets, try to build some of that underbelly of the roster because the Allen contract's coming up. We know that other guys are going to have to get paid. The cap's going to become a major problem over the next couple of years. So he could trade down and still get a corner like Melifano, like you mentioned, and then other pieces along the way. It's going to be fascinating. I think anything is probably on the table, but I do today, as I interview you, I have a feeling that corner is the open spot as well. I'm right there with you. But let me paint this picture for you. What happens at number 30 if you've got Farley available, you've got basically all the corners outside of J.C. Horn available, but you also have, let's say, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame drops significantly, or an edge rusher drops significantly for whatever reason. What kind of a dilemma do you think Bean has there?
Well, you look at it and you say to yourself, there's the two position groups that I think you need multiple guys, and multiple guys play. And this is the one thing through the years, when you look at the way this game is played, a good example is A.J. Epinesa. He comes to the team, he's their highest draft pick, but he's in the rotation and he plays. Maybe not every game, and then he started to play more and you work him in there. If he's an offensive lineman, he's not getting that opportunity unless somebody's out. Because you play five guys, you try to play them the whole way. And I think corner isn't quite the rotation that you see on D-line, but you're going to play multiple corners. Guys are going to be on the field. Like, you draft a guy number one, and probably Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson are still on the field for a good portion of the game because this is what you need, and rotating guys in and out and playing multiple corners. So when I see these guys, I say to myself, well, the Bills have talent on the D-line. They've spent a lot of money on the D-line, but those guys are old. And, and I'm talking NFL old, not my old. I'm talking about NFL old. I mean, you're got guys in their 30s, and you got to replace them.
No doubt.
So, yes, when you have an edge rusher that you believe fits what you want to do, and you can bring him in, they spent money. I take that back. They spent draft capital on Ed Oliver. And, the hope this year is, with help back on the inside, Ed's going to be even more effective. That's what they need out of him. And you got Epinesa, and you have pieces there. They have spent the money on Addison, right? They've spent money on that D-line and draft capital. And you look at it, and at the moment, that's the underperforming group. They're older and expensive. And so you say to yourself, bringing in a guy there is definitely, again, both fits need and want, and it's a player that will play right away, I would say. There's no doubt. Either of those positions is going to play right away.
Speaking of Ed Oliver, he kind of falls into a category right now for the Bills. Guys inside the building. So many people are worried about the free agency splash, and the Bills are bringing the band back together. I guess that's kind of nice, but it's boring because they didn't go make a splash. And I'm like, come on, Bills fans! Like, you don't want to run this thing back from from last year, a team that was one win away from the Super Bowl at least a couple more times. The same group, consistency, cohesion, led by Allen, Bean, McDermott. I mean, they had Diggs. I mean, I would want to run it back. But having said that, free agency, the draft, I mean, you kind of want to get the balance there, Mike, but the reality is free agency and the draft for the Bills, with the way they are right now, it might not matter if they get inside the walls people to take the next step, guys like Ed Oliver.
No doubt about it, and that's what they need, right? I mean, they want to see that out of Dawson Knox this year.
There's another one.
Because he's got to put up this year. I mean, it's interesting when we talk to Bean at the end of the year, and even Sean McDermott, how do I phrase this? I won't say they're all over him, but they don't hide their, I'll say, disappointment. You know, it's like when the parent says, I'm not mad at you, I'm disappointed. That's kind of what I get with Dawson because, you know, he had injury issues, he had drop issues, he had COVID issues. Like, he just had that kind of year, and I think they were expecting to see more. And right away, I mean, what did Brandon Beane say at the end of the year? We need more out of the tight end spot. Yep. So when I see those kind of guys, I'm like, okay, there's motivation because the guy's talented, and he's got to show more. And you remember in a rookie year with Ed, there was that moment where, I'm sorry, you're sitting down. Mm-hmm. Jordan Phillips was starting, and, you know, it's like Ed's not going to start. And I think it woke him up a little bit. He is a talented guy. I think he's a dedicated guy. But you're right. If you get more out of him, it's what you've expected. You drafted the guy in the first round. You expect him to progress and learn the game and all those things that go with it. He's an undersized guy for that position, but he's got the quickness. You know, he'll learning more about using his hands. And having Starr next to him, I would think would help because that's sort of the bulk that they were missing on the inside. But yes, in the building, you need more out of those guys. And some is more natural. Maybe this is the year. I got to tell you, I feel the same way about Tremaine Edmonds. And I really like him. I just look at him. Maybe it's because I look at him and think, this guy is built like a superstar. And I want to see him become that. And I want to see him make plays in that defense. I want to see him, you know, rush the quarterback. I want to see him pick off passes. I want to see him be that guy. And I know he's 22, going to be 23. I hear it a million times. Yeah. But it's fourth year in the league, and there is a point where you say, this is who he is. And it's, I don't know if you see this, but it's interesting to me that they sort of cover for him a little bit. They'll talk about the shoulder. We heard a lot about the shoulder. Now, I'm not going to pretend I'm not in there. I don't know how bad it was and how restrictive, and I probably should be giving him more credit for staying out on the field and playing. But I guess it's because I have such high hopes for I was thinking back, Jenna Cottrell and I were at the draft in Dallas when they drafted Josh and they drafted Tremaine, and we're in this little hallway waiting for them, and these two 6'5" guys are giving each other the hug, and I'm thinking, there it is. There's the quarterback, there's the linebacker, there's the key, quarterback of the defense. Let's see if this works. And the one guy has become a star, and the other guy is a nice player. And I just want to see more out of him because I think there's more there. So back to your point of elevating from inside the room, yeah, there's places to go up in those positions, especially on the defense with guys they've invested in.
And the Bills have hung in there with players. I mean, Taron Johnson, they hung in there with Neal. They hung in there with Levi Wallace. They bring him back, by the way. They've hung in there with a lot of guys, and it could just be a case where these guys, McDermott and Beane, they know talent so well that they know, okay, this year he's going to crack. Okay, this year he's going to crack. So maybe they're waiting around because they really think that maybe 2021 is the year that fill in the blank will crack and take that next step. Because after all, let's face it, Mike, I mean, the evidence is there. We've seen guys get benched. Zach Moss fumbles against San Francisco, gets brought back, wears down defenses in the fourth quarter, and is great before he gets injured. Johnson with the unbelievable return of the playoffs. Special teams players, offense, defense, all that sort of stuff. Maybe they really believe, hey, this guy's going to crack, and this is going to be it. Maybe they know. Maybe they know right now.
Well, and they put it there for that player and say, okay, let's see what you have. And they paid Matt Milano, and they have a decision to make. Now, it's by what? It's coming up in a few weeks. Tremaine Edmonds, I believe they're going to pick up the fifth-year option on him. It would make sense, right? I mean, that level of player, I don't see why they wouldn't be doing that. But, I look at another guy like Cody Ford, and he's had injury issues, changed position, high draft pick for them. But they certainly have brought in a lot of guys to say to Cody Ford, we have faith in you, but we're covering ourselves here if you're not ready to go this year. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what smart teams do. and they're not cutting ties with these guys, but it's constant competition. Constant. I mean, it's rare when there's only a few guys who walk out on the field and know it's their spot, right? Everybody else is working. And look at a guy like Darrell Williams last year. We were laughing about that, but like when he signed in free agency, it was a collective bit of a yawn, right? Mm-hmm. And the guy ended up coming in and,
he dominated.
Spain's gone.
Yeah.
They move people over.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, it's like, boom,
Mm-hmm.
Darrell Williams is a guy, and now you re-sign him. So the competition plays through. Like they're going to put the best guys out there. But you make a good point. Like they don't just give up on guys. They have a plan, and they try to make it work. But you better be showing results, or they will replace you.
Talking Bills football and NFL draft with Mike Catalana, one of the best in the business. 13 WHAM. I always get that confused. Is it 13 WHAM, 13 WHAM? Are you supposed to say the letters? I don't know.
It's 13 WHAM.
Okay.
When I started, I've been there so long, we changed the call letters. Like, we were WOKR, which is just the worst sounding thing in the world, but that's who we were. And then we were purchased by a radio station company, it was Clear Channel, and WHAM Radio, so they made us WHAM TV.
Yep.
But they no longer own us, and we're still WHAM, so we're 13 WHAM.
There you go, 13 WHAM, Fox Rochester Sports Director. Go check out BuffaloPlus.com as well. On Twitter at Mike Catalana. You brought up Josh Allen and how he became a superstar in 2020. So it leads me to this question. Do you think that Josh Allen has sustainability as a superstar?
Yeah. I think his physical tools are so good. Combine that with the work ethic and the coaching. Now, look, I say that about the coaching. He is incredibly fortunate to have had Brian Daboll there, including Jordan Palmer, which obviously Jordan Palmer has been a huge plus for him. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about during the season. I'm talking about that same voice in his head. I think of that Bengals game they won a few years ago where we have this shot of Brian Daboll just running out there, and he had an up-and-down game, and they made a play at the end. They ended up winning. And he's so excited for him. But I also have shots of Brian Daboll just lighting him up on the sidelines. Like, they had that relationship, and it's trust. And you've seen it with all these quarterbacks around the league. Like, I look at a guy like Carson Wentz, and, yes, things caved for him this past year. But he also basically had 4 different voices in his head over a period of 4 years. And not every player reacts to that as well. So I think basically Brian Daboll, who I thought was going to get a head coaching job, I think a lot of us did. I think Brian Daboll coming back again is huge. I think it's he's now to the point where I think Josh could handle a coaching change because he is now established. He is a built product now who, still needs coaching, but he is a very different player than he was. But, his work ethic and his relationship with his teammates and the fact that this franchise has been all on board building around him, I think makes him sustainable. I think he's got a short memory. He makes a mistake. He comes back. And again, he's tough. He's shown all that. He's proven that. And when we were a year ago, when we were talking about him coming in, I mean, people forget where Josh was a year ago.
Yeah.
I mean, he was no 300-yard games, no dominant passing games.
Terrible in the playoffs.
Collapse.
Yeah.
It collapsed.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I will say this. He wasn't spectacular in the playoffs. I mean, let's be fair. He was pretty good in that Colts game. They needed him to be. He was, okay in the Baltimore game and got, in a tough spot in that Kansas City game. So those are things, like any quarterback, he's got to overcome. He won 2 playoff games, so I'm not shooting him down here. I'm saying that's the next step, to be that guy, and dominate in the playoffs. But I think, yes, I do think it's sustainable. But I will say this. Last year, there were very, very, very few downs. He was up most of the time. He rarely had bad moments, bad game. He really did. I think it's hard to sustain, if he stayed on this trajectory this year, my God, what would he be doing? I think he's now reached a point where it's maintaining and improving a little that is going to be the goal, more so than the big jump that he made this past year.
Do you think you will see a Super Bowl win for the Bills in your time?
Yeah.
You do?
I think there's a very good chance that they can do that. Now, this is the other part I look at. I look at the Bills as the chasers. I look at this past year as they were chasing everybody, including New England, to whatever point, right? Even though New England was down. Like, you had to win that division. And everybody's on board. And it was fun. And it was, every game was just, we're piling on having this great season. And I gave them credit. There were times they could have been kind of lax, like going out to Denver or San Francisco, and they just pounded those teams.
Yeah.
Very impressive. It's tough to keep repeating that because you're now being chased.
That's it.
And while Kansas City is the team in front of you, you know who's right behind you? Baltimore, Cleveland, Indy, maybe even the Chargers this year, right? All these teams that are going, Buffalo, like they're looking at Kansas. They're not like saying, everybody should assume Kansas City's the team. They've been the team. Okay. But I don't think those teams look and go, well, Buffalo is definitely right there. You don't think the Colts think they're as good as the Bills? You don't think the Ravens think they're as good as the Bills? They absolutely do.
Yep.
So, yes, can they do it? Absolutely. But it's hard to maintain. It really is in this league. You get these windows, and you got to make it work. And last year they had a shot, and they really did not play well in Kansas City. And getting back to that spot is not easy. But, yes, I think this franchise, this coaching staff, this quarterback has it in them to do it. You just got to do it on the field.
And, oh, by the way, the division, the Jets, a lot of draft capital, maybe a year or two, maybe even 3 years away, but they've got a lot there with Douglas and company. The Dolphins are going to be good again. They're very well coached. They have a lot of capital. And, you just get that feeling, don't you, that Bill Belichick's lurking in the weeds somewhere where he's going to do something wild in the draft and something will happen where New England will not be last year's New England. And I still think he did a hell of a job to even get them at, 7-9 for crying out loud, with all the Corona and Cam and the defensive players opting out and all that. No offensive weapons, Edelman being injured. So I think the Patriots, I'd be careful if I'm in Western New York and I'm just writing off all of that business, man,
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And, maybe it's just because, I've lived through all of what Bill Belichick has done and been firsthand watching it and just realized he took a beating last year because Brady won the Super Bowl. And Brady's awesome, right? We all know that. But it was, the scales were tipped way too far in one direction. It was a weird offseason for the Patriots. They needed to build around Brady, and I think it was time probably for that to end, and he wanted something different. And I don't think the Patriots reacted particularly well to it. I think they almost, I won't say took the year off, but just basically took their lumps last year. And you probably have noticed Belichick's been different. He's actually speaking in sentences, complimenting players. Like, I think we're going to see a little different version of him on the positive side. I think he knows that, when you don't have Brady, you've got the quarterback worries like most teams do. But I got a feeling that they're going to be tough again this year. Their free agent signings got them some more talent. They have to make up for bad drafts. But he's such a good coach. And I do believe they'll have another quarterback, if it's not somebody to replace Cam, that will eventually replace Cam. And in fairness to Cam, like you saw too, when after COVID, he really was not even close to the same guy physically. Because they should have beaten the Bills in Buffalo. I mean, they should have won that game.
Yes.
And, and he fumbles it late, and that really was a big moment for both franchises. But, yes, I'm with you. The division is tougher. The AFC's landmines all over the place. Oh. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it just is. So, it's going to be a fun year, but, man, you can't just place yourself back in the AFC title game and get a spot back. It's going to take a lot to get there.
There's no doubt the reset button is there for a reason. Final one for you, Mike. NFL draft-wise, before the draft actually happens, when do you get real draft fatigue?
It's interesting. You kind of almost have it now, and then I'll get back again. But like there are so many mock drafts. There are so many people talking about it, and it does get to the point where
on with it.
Yeah, it is. Like you're just ready for it to come. And it's when the Bills are picking 30th, it is a lot different because, so many things will happen in front of them before they make a move, right? And so, it's not like when they were picking 6th, 7th, or 8th, and you're looking in the top 10 and it's a quick move. But it's different when you have this established team with the quarterback and you're drafting in that way. But when you look back at teams, drafting well is such a huge thing, and how we don't really know at the moment what you're getting, and the reaction or the overreaction is so huge, and coaches or general managers get crushed for, they get crushed for a pick on that day, and it turns out to be great, or they get credit when no one knows whether the guy can play or not. I guess we'll all find out. So I would say this for Bills fans. Brandon Beane's a smart guy. Brandon Beane takes a measured approach to things. He always has a plan. Not all of them work out, but he always has a plan. And I think if you have that in this league, it puts the odds in your favor, and it's worked so far. But now taking that last step is massive. And the right draft pick can help this team to fill in a couple of gaps, but it's not as big of a deal for the long term of the team, or for the short term of the team for this year as it's been in past years, because they got a pretty good roster going into this year.
By the way, in your Twitter profile, are you being sarcastic, saying that you're never sarcastic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Because I do have to guard against being, like last night I was watching the Sabres and I said...
hell of a game, hell of a win.
Yeah, I said this team still hasn't figured out how to play Ralph Sampson.
I saw that. That was a great tweet.
Right. Well, and I had a guy say to me, well, they're playing well. And I go, no,
I'm kidding. Yeah. Well, and the problem on Twitter is that it's Twitter. It's... what and then the fire starts and the back and forth starts and the negativity starts and I don't even tweet really much during any kind of games anymore because I can't handle it. I just can't.
Well, I just laugh because sometimes then somebody will respond to me and then about 10 minutes later they go, wait, were you being sarcastic?
That's it.
I'm like, I was at that moment.
Right,
so.
Right. Well, he's covered the Buffalo Bills for quite a while. Hundreds of games covered. 13 WHAM and Fox Rochester sports director on Twitter at Mike Catalana, and of course BuffaloPlus.com. I encourage you to go to that website as well. Mike, thank you a million. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Mike, thanks. And again, one other thing, if I said, we also really have done a lot on our YouTube page, Buffalo Plus YouTube.
Perfect. Go subscribe, everyone.
Dan and Jenna and myself, and we have a lot of fun, a lot of stuff leading up to the draft, too. So check that out in our podcast, and I really enjoyed being on.